Is the Broncos receiving core the weakest link on the roster? This is your Denver Sports Daily for June 18th.
The biggest stories, the latest news. It's Denver Sports Daily.
Is the Broncos roster receiving core the weakest on the offensive side of the roster? No. There's a case to be made, but no, it's not. Pro Football Focus, though, may think it's something else. Pro Football Focus, or PFF, ranked the Broncos as the 22nd best receiving core out of 32 teams. Now, last year, the Broncos were ranked 28th, but with the addition of Evan Ingram and the performance and growth of Marvin Mims, that boosted them up to 22 this year. That is still too low, at least in my opinion. Now, the one thing holding the Broncos roster, or just the receiving core, back from being something better is having a true wide receiver one. They don't have a real wide receiver one or a true wide receiver one. There are cases to be made, but Courtland Sutton is a wide receiver two. Now, that being said, Courtland Sutton was the first 1,000-yard receiver for the Broncos since he did it back in 2019. So that's now two for him since 2019. So he can be that wide receiver one. But ranking the Broncos at 22, that feels low. Bo Nix had almost 4,000 passing yards. He finished with exactly 3,775 passing yards. You don't do that with the 22nd best receiving core in the league. You just don't. It's a rookie, and he's coming in passing for almost 4,000 yards. He's one game away, basically, from 4,000 yards. And you're going to rank him that low? Now, with Sutton, Mims, Vele, and Ingram added to the roster, the Broncos should be higher. I'm not saying they're top 10. I'm not saying they're top 5. But they should be around 15. Having them at 22 feels like kind of a, kick. It doesn't feel great. But, hey, it's PFF. We've gotten used to this. They aren't the best at ranking where the Broncos should be. The Broncos overall have a top 10 roster in the league, and that's not seeing it through orange-tinted glasses. That is seeing it factually. You look at the defense is number one in the league. That I might be seeing through orange-tinted glasses, but this is the best defense in the league. I mean, you had two duos on the defensive line who had the most top 5 in sacks over the season. Two different duos. And now you're looking at the receiving core. You're pointing that out, saying, hey, it's not good enough. With Courtland Sutton, 1,000 yards last season. Marvin Mims, who turned up. They're finally using him correctly. Look at what Marvin Mims did last year. Devon Vele. This guy's turned up in minicamp and OTA. He's going to be a problem. That guy was a 7th-round pick. And then Evan Ingram, you're taking him and adding him to this offensive firepower, this offensive squad, where they can now give Bo Nix the opportunity to look at different players around the field, because he didn't want to pass to a tight end last season. With the way the Broncos roster is set up right now, specifically the receiving room, they should be much higher than 22. That's just another day of PFF saying that the Broncos aren't good enough. Now, moving on, should the Nuggets bring in a former player in free agency, a former fan favorite, a former loved player on this Nuggets team? That's Gary Harris. He was a key piece to the Nuggets for several years and helped lead the charge to that 2020 Western Conference Finals run. Now, the Orlando Magic declined their team option on Harris, which means now he is a free agent. He can explore the market. He can see which teams want him, which teams don't. And it's going to be a lot of teams that don't want him. And the Nuggets may be able to jump on that opportunity to pick up somebody who is very solid when he was on this squad. I mean, you look at, when you say solid, you're thinking of just a regular guy on the team. No, Gary Harris was one of the main options for this team just several years ago. I remember when he was hitting buzzer beaters against the Golden State Warriors to win a game, to win a 3-point buzzer beater. If you remember that play, Nikola Jokic passes it across the floor, hits Gary Harris on the wing, buzzer beater, game time. Now, Gary Harris was a great player for the Nuggets, but he's somewhat fallen off from what he once was. Last season, he averaged only 3 points per game, 1.3 rebounds per game, and 0.6 assists per game. Those are not great numbers, but in his prime with the Nuggets back in 2017, yes, I know that was 8 years ago, which is wild to say, but anyways, back in 2017, he averaged 17.5 points per game, 2.6 rebounds per game, and 2.9 assists per game. That's when he was the starting shooting guard for this Nuggets squad with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, of course, there. But he could not perform necessarily at that level, but he could come back and perform at a level off the bench that would prove to be successful for the Nuggets. And not only could he come back and add to this bench depth, the Nuggets might need him. Russell Westbrook declined his player option. It would make a lot of sense for the Nuggets to look at bringing in a backup like Gary Harris on a minimum contract. If he were to come to the Nuggets this offseason, he could provide a solid perimeter shooting boost off the bench. And that's just what that is. He's a solid shooter. He can space the floor. And that is one thing that we know the Nuggets have had a lack of in the past several years. They can't space the floor at all. So bringing in somebody like Harris to help provide a shooting boost off the bench, especially surrounded by players like Julian Strawther, who's a solid shooter, Payton Watson, who can light it up from the corner. Getting those guys out there on the second unit could prove to be incredibly beneficial for the Nuggets. But we'll have to see. This offseason is going to be incredibly packed for the Nuggets. It's going to be huge, and it needs to be. If it's not, then they made a problem, or they made a mistake. If they can't go out there and make the most of this very, very important offseason, then they're going to do the same thing they did last year, where they end up losing in the second round, another game 7 in round 2. You can't keep doing that. You got to make some changes, and right now is the time to do so while your window is still wide open. And I don't want to hear anything about the window being closed for the Nuggets, because it is still as wide open as it'll ever be, and that's because Nikola Jokic is in his prime. It's open. Get the guys around Nikola Jokic. Go out and get somebody like Gary Harris, because we know that Nikola Jokic, like a lot of the great quarterbacks in the NFL, lifts up all of his teammates with him. Rising water raises all ships, and Nikola Jokic does that. He brings everybody else up with him, and bringing somebody like Gary Harris back, who has chemistry with this team, with most of the starters already on this squad. If you can do that, it could prove to be very beneficial. But we'll have to see, because if he comes out and he performs like he did last season, where he's only averaging 3 points per game, it won't be anything. Now, moving on, the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, the Florida Panthers are back-to-back Stanley Cup champs. I don't really know anybody that was rooting for Florida. I feel like most people were on that Edmonton side. I'm going to be honest, I was so for Edmonton. I wanted to get their revenge on Florida, but nope, the Panthers took them down in back-to-back years, winning the Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup champs, they took down the Edmonton Oilers in their rematch in 6 games, finishing the series strong, beating Edmonton 5-1. It really felt like that game was never going to be won after the first period for the Edmonton Oilers. They were down 3-0, and they just couldn't get anything going. They were looking tired, which you don't expect to see in a game 6, in an elimination game in the Stanley Cup. It just wasn't going the Oilers' way the entire time. But you know whose way it was going? Sam Reinhart. That guy was on a mission, scoring 4 goals in a closeout game. 4 goals in game 6 of the Stanley Cup to win the cup. That's insane. Amazing. You're getting a hat trick plus 1. Now, this is the second cup that the Panthers have won, second in a row. They've been to the championship 3 years in a row. And what really needs to happen is that the Avalanche need to step in and stop Florida from winning another championship. They did it. They've done it before. Get out in front of the Panthers and take them down next year, because I don't want to hear anything more about the Florida Panthers. I'm just so tired of it. But that'll do it for your Denver Sports Daily. I do want to read some of your comments. No, you're welcome. I'm assuming you're responding to the title of this, which is the receiving core, the weakest link on the Broncos offense. No, you're welcome. You're right. I don't think that it's the weakest link. I still think that there needs to be changes. Not necessarily changes, but there needs to be growth in the running back room. If there's going to be anything that's the weakest link, it might be the running back room. But honestly, weakest link is a harsh term to use, because everything on this Broncos squad is solid. They're looking really good right now. This offseason has been incredible for the Broncos. So saying anything as the weakest link feels bad. It feels wrong to say, but there's got to be one. And I just don't think it's the receiving room. If Sean Payton trusts the wide receivers, us as a fan base should too. I agree with trusting the wide receivers. I don't necessarily agree with trusting everything Sean Payton does. I'll get into that at a different time, but I mostly agree with what you're saying here, because I trust the wide receivers. I'm looking out there at Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, Evan Ingram. Those guys are solid. And with what Bo Nix did with them last year, the chemistry is going to be off the charts, and they're going to be incredible next season. I can't wait to see what this pass game looks like next year, because Sean Payton's going to definitely draw up some real good plays and real good systems that are going to get this team moving. But that'll do it for your Denver Sports Daily. I will see you all on Friday. We are off tomorrow. No shows all around the board, but we will see you guys all on Friday. Until then, y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.